My name is Kody Michael Gerkin, and I was born in Michigan, raised in Michigan, went to Michigan State, studied at James Madison College. I got a bachelor's degree in international relations, and then I joined the Peace Corps. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala, and subsequently went to graduate school, and I've now founded my own nonprofit working back in my former Peace Corps site. I had always thought maybe someday I would be a Peace Corps volunteer. And so I started having a conversation with the recruiter that worked in the office, and the ball just got rolling, and I got really excited, and I was one of the few people I knew who I thought could join the Peace Corps, and I thought it was something that people should do. I think it's a program that people should participate in. So I convinced myself to do it, and I went to Guatemala, and it absolutely changed the course of my life. Mujerave. Yeah, it's a combination of the Spanish word for woman and one of the Spanish words for bird.
Oh, okay.
So the idea is that as an organization, I talked about this a little bit yesterday, we practice gender mainstreaming, which is something I learned about at Michigan State. I focused quite a bit of my studies on gender studies and gender issues. It was something I looked at a lot. I probably would have gotten a minor in it. I don't know if it was, available, but that was my focus. And so we put the word for woman and the word for bird together, like women's empowerment, women soaring, that kind of a thing. Well, as I was saying, we're all about women's empowerment. So we practice sustainable development, but our vehicle, so to speak, is women's empowerment. The projects that we realize, whether we're working directly with women's groups, in the case of our pilot projects, we built stoves, which is the project I worked on as a Peace Corps volunteer, and we built a greenhouse, 5 meters wide, 12 meters long. They just planted 200 tomato plants in it about 10 days ago. And that's a project that's split between 2 families, and then we built stoves in 6 homes as well. Again, it was a project I'd worked on in the Peace Corps, but it had been a while since I was on the ground, making it happen. So it felt really good. I stayed out in the campo. I stayed out with a family in my former Peace Corps site. Actually, even more remote than my former Peace Corps site. I was out farther in a rural area, dirt road kind of a situation. It's very basic. We're talking about bottom billion kind of people, dirt floors, adobe shacks. So they're making them out of local clay and mud and things like that. Living the same kinds of lifestyles they would have thousands of years ago, really. Eating similar diets, making their own clothing, still subsistence farming, just growing the food that they eat. Really, it's the main occupation in the areas that we work in. But we look through the gender lens. We practice gender mainstreaming. Long way around there, but we don't have a gender program or a women's development program. Everything that we do, from planning to project execution to monitoring and evaluating, we're looking at gender and how gender plays out in Guatemala. Women are isolated, oppressed, marginalized, and have been for half a millennia since the Spanish arrived, really, and in some ways even longer within their own culture. As gender roles play out in all cultures, there's some forms of oppression in different ways. But it's particularly bad for indigenous women in Guatemala.
Yeah, definitely.
So we work directly with them in the projects that we do. Our hope is that there are some of the corollary benefits of working with us for these women's groups are that they develop the skills they need to work with other organizations in the future. So if they do a project with us, there are women that are learning about how to put together the budget. There are women that are learning how to mix the organic fertilizer. There are women that are helping us build the greenhouse or helping us build the stove, just learning how to work with other groups or people in positions of power. I carry a lot of power with me into these communities. I have to be aware of that as a white man. Exactly. So even just some of those kind of soft business skills, that goes such a long ways. Or if you have a business person who's never really kept a budget. So you have a program like Excel or even something just handwritten up This is where you put how much you spend. This is where you put how much you're coming in. Now you can start to see, wow, I make a lot in this kind of a product. And then there's so much need in the developing world, and there's so much need in the area of Guatemala that we work in. Any kind of assistance you can offer, from teaching someone Excel to a pair of shoes, can change people's lives. Definitely. So when I returned to my former Peace Corps site in 2014, by this time I was married. My wife and I had traveled to Guatemala previously, but we also got a chance to go abroad and live in the Middle East for several years. So I was teaching Spanish and English at a branch campus of a Dutch university in Doha, Qatar for several years. My wife got a job there. The whole time we were there, we were kind of thinking about coming back to Latin America, so we did. We decided to move to Cusco, Peru, sort of on a whim. We moved there and never really felt home, but we traveled through Latin America together, and we kind of started traveling north, and we both were happy when we got back to Guatemala, so we decided to post up there, and I got a job, and then, so anyway, sorry, I'm kind of rambling. In 2014, when I returned to Guatemala with my wife, we took a look around, and we saw the effects of a massive ongoing drought. So, 2014 to 2015, they lost 75% of the corn and bean crop nationwide. There were cattle dying from drought. It was a very bad situation. So you've got a lot of subsistence farmers who are on the edge already. You know, as I mentioned earlier, bottom billion people living on $1.50 a day, maybe $2 if they're lucky. Their children are the most malnourished children anywhere in the Americas. The average indigenous girl will only go to school 3 to 4 years of formal schooling, average. So the situation is dire, and then you throw this drought at them, which is really the result of climate change, the result of a lot of things that are outside of their control already. It's just another layer of oppression that's been laid on them. And of course, single women with children in rural areas are the worst affected, as usual. I think that's kind of generally going to be the pattern when we're looking at climate change impacting lifestyles. It'll be people on the fringe who suffer the worst. That's how it works. Even in the States, Hurricane Katrina, for example. Mm-hmm. So that's what we saw when we got there. We saw the effects of this massive drought, and the only thing that people really wanted to talk about was food security. You know, I was considering raising some money to run some projects in my former Peace Corps site because I was back. And it felt good to see a lot of people who I worked with at the time in the development sector who've gone on to do other things in the development sector, Guatemalans mostly. And I started reconnecting with people, and I was thinking about fundraising, and then through a series of jobs and job interviews, I felt like if I started a nonprofit, I could practice things responsibly and ethically in a way that I didn't feel comfortable with other organizations that I was applying to work for. And we are small. We're a very small organization. We're an all-volunteer organization right now. And we're interested in in growing like any other organization, but I want to do it responsibly. I want to do it ethically. So our financial statements are always up on our website. You can email me, and I will send you a copy of our today's financial statement. I feel like the nonprofit sector should be held to a higher standard, really, than the rest of the business sector, because they're purporting to do responsible things with your money. And I've seen many cases of that, many times where that's not the case. I'm not the first one to say this. There are many big nonprofits and big, even governmental organizations that try to provide social services and fail. There's a lot of corruption. I mean, in Guatemala, last year they jailed the president for corruption, the sitting president. And then they elected, kind of like what we're seeing in U.S. politics, they wanted an outsider, and they elected a television comedian with no political experience to the office of presidency. He's now the president of Guatemala. Long story short, I felt like if I opened a nonprofit, I would have a better chance of seeing the kind of responsibility and ethical in every decision that we make. Being fiscally responsible and transparent is really important for us. And as we grow, that's one thing I'm not willing to be flexible about.